I believed I'd encountered every odd request, until my manager propositioned me to go out with his son in exchange for cash. Even stranger, it wasn't meant to be just a casual dinner. What began as an unremarkable Tuesday quickly spiraled into one of the most bewildering experiences I've ever had. That morning, my blouse was a mess of creases, the lift crept upward as if stuck in molasses, and my coffee tasted as though someone had brewed it over a pile of old cartridges. I was halfway through updating formulas in my spreadsheet when a sharply dressed aide from the C-suite quietly appeared behind me, flashing a rehearsed grin. "Mr. Blackwood is expecting you immediately." I blinked. "Me? What?" Her shrug said everything and nothing. "Just head up. He's waiting." My stomach dropped. Mr. Blackwood, the CEO, a man who didn't summon people unless something was seriously wrong or about to get even more serious. My head spun with possibilities as I rode the elevator up. I hadn't missed any deadlines, hadn't stirred up office drama, but the glass doors to the top floor opened anyway, swallowing me in quiet tension and too much carpet. His office was sleek and cold, like a high-rise cathedral. Mr. Blackwood was already seated behind his desk, fingers steepled, his silver cuff links catching the light like they were made to intimidate. "Sit, Jordan." I sat. He studied me for a moment, and that pause dragged across the room like a wire waiting to snap. "I won't waste your time," he said. "I need a personal favor, one that won't affect your standing here if handled correctly." I managed a small nod. "Of course, sir." He didn't smile. "It's about my son." That gave me pause. I barely knew he had one. There were rumors, whispers, mentions of a son who traveled more than he stayed put. Quiet, hard to figure out. The sort of guy who showed up in magazine spreads but not in board meetings. Mr. Blackwood continued, each word deliberate. "I'm concerned about him. Julian hasn't exactly flourished. He doesn't connect with people, doesn't trust easily, but I think that could change if someone like you spent time with him." I furrowed my brow. "Someone like me. You're grounded, level-headed, charismatic enough to hold your own, but not loud enough to threaten him. He needs someone real." There was a pause. "You want me to befriend him?" "I want you to date him," he said bluntly. I blinked. "You heard me?" I stared speechless. "You want me to date your son?" "He trusts no one," Mr. Blackwood said, leaning forward slightly. "But he notices people and he's noticed you." "I've seen it." 100 thoughts flooded my mind at once. "But I've never even spoken to him." "You'll have your chance. You'll meet him tomorrow." "Much. I'll cover the bill. I'll also compensate your time, of course." There it was. The twist of the knife. Compensate. $7,000 a month. Quietly wired. This isn't prostitution, Jordan. This is companionship, company, presence. I want you to bring out the part of him he's buried. I should have walked out. Should have refused, politely or otherwise. But curiosity, it's a seductive thing, especially when it's wrapped in money and mystery. And deep down something told me this wasn't about the money at all. What if he finds out? I asked. "That's your job. Don't let him." I left the office in a daze. It wasn't just the absurdity of the request. It was the way Mr. Blackwood had spoken, as if he already knew I'd say yes. Like it wasn't a request, but a chess move he'd already counted on me making. The next day came faster than I expected. Julian arrived at the restaurant 5 minutes late, dressed like someone who didn't care if the world saw him or not. His shirt was untucked, one side half-buttoned, the kind of casual richness that made you wonder if he'd slept in a $2,000 jacket. He slid into the seat across from me and didn't smile. "So, you're the one?" I swallowed. "Excuse me?" "My father's latest project." "Don't worry, he thinks he's subtle." "He isn't." I hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Is that what this is?" Julian tilted his head, eyes narrowing slightly. They were an arresting shade of gray, not soft, but piercing. "If it is, let's skip the performance. Are you going to play the charming office boy or just sit there looking like you want to bolt?" "Neither," I said before I could stop myself. "Unless you want me to." Something flickered across his face. Maybe amusement, maybe interest. HQ'd answer. He picked up the menu like it was a prop, then set it down. "I'm not a date guy. I don't do small talk. So, if this is some plan to fix me, you're wasting your time." "I wasn't told to fix you," I said carefully. "I was told to spend time with you." He said, leaning back. "So you're getting paid." I froze. Julian smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was razor-edged. "Relax. I already knew." The waiter interrupted before I could speak again. We ordered something forgettable, but I barely noticed because Julian's stare never left mine, like he was trying to see what I'd lie about next. "You're not like the others," he said after a beat. "They usually pretend for longer." "I'm not pretending," I said softly. "Even better," he murmured. And that was the moment I realized I wasn't sure which of us was in control. By the end of the meal, he stood without saying goodbye. "Come by tomorrow," he said. "I'll text you the address. Bring nothing, just yourself." He walked off like it meant nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a fuse had been lit, and I didn't know how long I had before it reached something explosive. That night I barely slept. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m., his name on the screen, just an address, nothing else. I arrived the next day to a loft that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. Clean lines, too much glass. He opened the door, towels slung around his neck, his t-shirt still clinging to damp skin, hair curling at his temples from a recent shower. "Didn't think you'd come. You texted," I said, stepping inside. "And yet you're here." I wasn't sure if it was a statement or a test, but I was already inside, already too deep to pretend I was just curious now. We spent hours saying little but learning a lot. His music tastes sharp and chaotic, his fridge empty except for champagne and almond milk. He offered me nothing and everything all at once. Somewhere between a sarcastic laugh and a glance that lingered too long, the space between us changed. He reached out once, fingers brushing mine when we passed each other in the kitchen. No words, just that charged silence, like something had shifted, something neither of us wanted to name. Later he sat beside me on the couch, legs too close, his scent sharp and warm, something expensive. We talked about everything and nothing. Movies, the way people fake smiles, the worst kinds of silence. Then, without preamble, he said, "You don't look at me the way most people do. How do they look at you? Like I'm either a puzzle or a paycheck? And how do I look at you?" His eyes met mine like, "You want to know what I taste like?" I swallowed. Julian leaned in, slow and unapologetic. His lips stopped just short of mine, waiting. I didn't move. I didn't need to. He kissed me like it wasn't the first time, like we'd done this before and never wanted to stop. It wasn't soft. It wasn't unsure. It was possession disguised as curiosity. The kind of kiss that tells you you're already losing control. I didn't stop him. Not when he moved closer. Not when his fingers ghosted the edge of my jaw. The heat rose slowly, pulsing, growing into something undeniable. The way his hands slid against my sides, the way his mouth pressed hungrily to my neck. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something overdue. But the story didn't end there. Oh no, the craziest part was yet to come. Because the next morning, I wasn't sure if what had happened was real or some strange intoxicating dream. The scent of him still lingered faintly on my skin as if the night had stained me. I hadn't stayed over, not entirely, but I hadn't left unmarked either. We hadn't spoken much after things had quieted, and yet something between us had shifted. Something unspoken but impossible to ignore. He hadn't texted, not that I expected him to. Julian didn't seem like the type to chase or follow up, and I didn't want to read too much into what we shared, though part of me already had. Still, I went to work pretending I wasn't distracted, like my mind wasn't replaying the heat of his breath behind my ear, or the way his hands knew just how to explore without asking permission. Mr. Blackwood called me into his office again. I braced myself. "How's it going?" he asked casually, but his eyes were razor sharp, scanning me like a surgeon. "With Julian?" I asked, trying not to sound defensive. "Yes," I swallowed. "He's interesting, smart, guarded. But is he opening up?" I hesitated. "He's starting to." Mr. Blackwood's lips twitched almost like a smirk, but it never quite reached his eyes. "Good. Keep going." That was it. No mention of money, no warning, just an order disguised as a suggestion. He waved me out like he'd already moved on to more important things, and I left the room feeling more like a hired spy than a real person. Julian messaged me that evening. "You free tonight?" "For what?" I replied, teasing. "Don't start. Just come." No location, no details, just that same address. I went. When I arrived, the lights inside were low, shadows stretching across the walls like they were listening in. Julian sat on the couch barefoot, hoodie draped over his shoulders like armor he didn't bother to fasten. He looked up slowly like he'd been waiting for me longer than he wanted to admit. "Hey," I said, setting my keys on the counter. No kiss, no rush, just that strange humming energy between us. He nodded toward the couch. I joined him. We watched some old indie movie he said he liked but barely paid attention to. His arm rested behind me, his fingers occasionally brushing my shoulder like they were tracing a thought. I didn't ask questions. Neither of us did. We were just there, tangled in a silence that didn't need to be filled. Eventually he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what this is, but I don't want it to stop. I turned my face toward him, then let it keep going. And it did slowly, beautifully. We didn't rush. That night was softer. Fewer words, more space between every breath. His hands moved slower, like he was memorizing instead of claiming. The heat was there, burning under the surface, but it was gentler this time, like something sacred we weren't ready to name. When his fingers found mine and held them tightly, it said more than anything either of us could have spoken aloud. Later, I lay beside him, watching the way his chest rose and fell, his jaw relaxed in sleep. I wasn't sure if this peace was real or just a fragile pause before everything caught up to us. And yet, a part of me still wanted to fall anyway. I was starting to care. And that made everything else so much harder. The weeks passed like that. Days at work, nights with Julian. The money still came, tucked away quietly in my account. But I stopped checking. It didn't matter anymore. Not compared to the way he started texting me first. The way his kisses lingered. The way he started opening drawers for me in his kitchen like I belonged there. He showed me a version of himself I don't think he shared with anyone else. Not the cold, distant air people whispered about, but a boy who read poetry late at night and fell asleep with music playing quietly beside him. Someone who hated wearing shoes and had a strange obsession with scented candles. Someone who felt everything even if he didn't always show it. But the closer we got, the harder it was to ignore the truth. He didn't know and I was still lying. One night, we were at his place again, dinner delivered, wine half finished. Julian was stretched across the couch, his head in my lap, eyes half closed. My dad said something weird today, he murmured. I stiffened. Yeah. He asked if I was happy. I played dumb. And what did you say? Julian opened his eyes, looking up at me. I told him I was starting to be for the first time in a long time. Something twisted in my chest. He reached up, brushing his fingers across my cheek. And you know the crazy part? It scares the hell out of me. What? Because I know what happens when things feel good. They don't last. I leaned down, kissing his forehead. Maybe this time's different. But even as I said it, I knew we were on borrowed time. 2 days later, he showed up at my place unexpectedly. No warning, no text, just him standing at my door, looking like the world had just shifted beneath his feet. I need to ask you something, he said, voice tight. I stepped aside, heart already racing. Okay. He walked in, then turned to face me. Did my father pay you? The silence that followed felt like it could have cracked concrete. And my throat dried up. Julian, his face didn't change. That made it worse. I asked him today, he said quietly. Straight up. And he didn't deny it. He just said it was complicated. I couldn't lie anymore. Not with his eyes burning into me like that. Not after everything we'd shared. He did, I said, barely above a whisper. At the beginning, he nodded slowly like he'd already known. And now I stepped toward him. Now, I don't care about the money. I care about you. But it started as a job, he said, voice flat. You were paid to get close to me. I didn't expect to feel anything, I said quickly. I didn't expect to fall. His jaw clenched. But you did. Yes. The silence stretched again. He looked at me like he was trying to decide whether to hate me or believe me. I don't know what to do with this. You don't have to do anything, I said softly. I just need you to know that what we have now, it's not fake. He didn't speak. Just walked past me and out the door. I didn't stop him. I didn't have the right to. And just like that, the world we'd built collapsed. But everything we had built was still standing on a fault line, quiet, fragile, and waiting for the next shift. I spent the next few days in a haze, caught between a desperate need for reconciliation and an overwhelming guilt that gnawed at me every waking moment. Every time my phone lit up or the reflection in a window reminded me of Julian's face, I felt that same sharp sting of regret. I knew I had crossed a line, and the consequences were already echoing in the silence of our recent conversations. I tried to bury myself in work, but every spreadsheet and board meeting was a reminder of the transaction that had ignited this impossible connection. Mr. Blackwood's earlier directives and measured nods in our meetings replayed in my mind like a relentless loop. There was no escaping it. The money had been deposited. The contract was unspoken but understood. And I was left to untangle the fallout of playing with someone's trust and heart. I recalled Julian's eyes that night when he left my apartment cold and distant, as if a part of him had permanently sealed off from me. I replayed every word from his questions about his father's motives. I remembered the quiet despair in his voice as he admitted he felt manipulated and my own response, a rushed confession that barely scratched the surface of truth. I had promised him something real, something that I now feared might never materialize. In the midst of my self-reproach, a message appeared on my screen. It was from Julian. "We need to talk tonight. 9:00 p.m. at the old rooftop cafe." I hesitated only a moment before replying, aware that any delay might drive him further away. My fingers trembled as I typed, unsure if I was seeking forgiveness or merely confronting the inevitable fallout. That evening I arrived at the rooftop cafe, a secluded space high above the city, where the neon lights blurred with the darkening sky. The air was cool and the hum of distant traffic provided a steady, if indifferent, background. I sat at a small table, my mind racing with every scenario of what the conversation might bring. When Julian appeared, his posture was tense, his eyes guarded as they scanned my face, as if trying to detect a hint of the man he had once trusted. Without preamble he spoke. "You've been avoiding me." I swallowed hard. "I wasn't sure how to face you after." My voice trailed off, the words refusing to come out fully. He shook his head, the movement stiff. "I asked you about the money. I needed to know what it meant for us." His tone was even, measured, yet beneath it lay an undercurrent of hurt. For so long I felt used. Like every connection, every relationship in my life was measured against some expectation or transaction. And with you, I was desperate to believe that was wrong, that what we had was real. His words pierced me and I reached out. "Julian, I never meant to use you. I was as surprised as you were. The money, it was just the starting point. I got caught up in something I didn't see coming. I'm so sorry." For a long moment, silence blanketed us, punctuated only by the distant sound of wind stirring the night. Julian's eyes searched mine for answers I wasn't sure I could provide. "But you did," he finally said, voice trembling with a mixture of anger and vulnerability. "It started as a job. I knew that from the moment you agreed, but I hoped you'd find something more." His hands clenched on the table and I could almost see the fight he had waged internally. Tears welled up as I realized how deeply I had hurt him. "I did find more, Julian. I found something I couldn't explain. A connection, something genuine. But I understand if you can't believe me now." He leaned back, closing his eyes for a brief moment. "It's not just about belief, is it? It's about trust, and once that's broken, it's hard to rebuild." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of every moment of deception. "I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild it. I never intended to hurt you. I was scared. Scared of the truth. Scared of what it might mean if I admitted I was falling for you." Julian opened his eyes, the anger in them softening into something fragile. "And what about your own heart? Were you afraid that you weren't enough for me? That everything you did was just a transaction until you realized you cared?" My throat tightened as I struggled to find the right words. Yes, I was terrified. Every day I felt like I was living two lives. The one that was dictated by a deal and the one that was real, raw, and unpredictable. And in the end, the real part took over, but not without cost. He paused, his gaze drifting away as if lost in memories of a better time. The rooftop around us seemed to close in. The city's lights a stark contrast to the darkness of the moment. I spent so long thinking that if I kept my distance I'd be safe. But you made me feel something. Made me forget that I was just the pawn in his game. There was a moment of brittle silence before he asked softly, "Do you regret it?" I met his eyes, unsure of how to answer. "I regret hurting you more than anything. I regret letting you believe in something I wasn't prepared for, but I don't regret falling for you. I do regret that I made you doubt what we could be." Julian's gaze shifted downward, his voice quiet and conflicted. "I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel like every time I try to trust someone, I'm reminded that I'm only ever an option, a side project to be manipulated." His words echoed in the still night air. "How do you prove that you're not just another one of his schemes? I leaned forward, my voice earnest. By being honest with you from now on, by giving you every part of me that's real and raw. I'll never ask for your forgiveness, but I'll keep fighting for you. Every day if that's what it takes. He looked at me, his eyes flickering with uncertainty and a hint of hope. I want to believe you, but trust isn't built in a single conversation. It's built over time, through actions, through every moment where we choose each other over the lies. I reached across the table and gently took his hand, mindful of the delicate nature of the moment. Then let me show you. Let me prove that I'm not just here because of a contract or a deal. I'm here because I care. I love you, Julian, despite everything. His grip tightened, and I saw a glimpse of the vulnerable man I loved. Maybe we can start over, he murmured, but it won't be easy. I understood and was ready. I want you, not a deal. Life without you feels incomplete. The rooftop held our confessions as hope grew. But Mr. Blackwood's shadow loomed. Julian's phone buzzed. His expression hardened. It was Blackwood, displeased. My father knows, Julian said. He sees it as betrayal. The weight of our situation crashed down. This was about power, not just us. I vowed to stand by him. We'd figure it out. Julian's resolve hardened. Fight his influence or step out of the shadows. The question hung heavy. I wasn't ready to lose him. Our betrayal throbbed, but redemption whispered. Uncertain, yet I believed we were worth the risk. I squeezed his hand. Not closure, a first step. It wasn't over. 3 days of ache, then Julian arrived at my door, soaked and silent. He'd confronted his father, refusing to be managed. His father forced a choice, him or me. Julian chose me. Relief washed over me. You chose me, I whispered. I'll show you it was the right choice. His guarded strength cracked. We kissed, deliberately, truthfully. Choosing each other after everything. I'm scared, Julian admitted. Me too, I whispered. Not with you. Later we lay in each other's arms, a fierce understanding beneath the quiet. A week later Mr. Blackwood stepped down. No contact. Julian said, he wanted me to be someone else. Now? I asked. I want to figure out who I am. You are? I said. Be part of it. It wasn't easy. Doubts lingered, but we talked, argued, kissed, unraveled together. A deal became a choice, a truth. We give half-truths about how we met because what happened is messy, beautiful, complicated, sacred, ours. The past lingers but doesn't define us. Julian's touch, his nearness, our trust defines us. Still glad you chose me, he whispers. I always whisper back. It started as a deal but became something real, worth every risk. The only thing I'm sure of.